Hello and welcome to today's show on Our Game. Shane Stapleton taking the Monday off, surprisingly, given that Tipperary had such a good day in Nolan Park yesterday. But I've an able deputy in Fintan O'Toole at the 42. Fintan, how are you?
I'm very good, Vernie, and yourself?
Good. Just wondering off the top of the head, Fintan, any particular takeaway from the weekend or anything that stood out? Obviously, from Limerick's dominance to maybe Tipper back, anything in particular that stood out?
I suppose the game I was at was Limerick Clare Saturday night, so that's probably the one that's kind of freshest in your mind, isn't it? You know, when you've after a league weekend, you're probably going to the match you were actually at, and just interesting that the statistical kind of quirk. Limerick scored 16 points in the first half against Cork. They scored 16 points in the first half against Clare. But on this occasion, on Saturday night, there was no let up in the third quarter. And you just had stuff like the way Kyle Hayes was playing. Like we'll get into all this, I presume, in a while. But people like Micheál Houlihan, Shane O'Brien coming to the fore, Keane Lynch back starting. And just not an original take, but basically they are at the head of the pack, you know, looking at the evidence of Saturday night. And it really is up to everyone else to try and get up there. And that's even with the caveat of, I'm sure you found this, in comparison to the Football League, it is difficult to know or kind of believe in everything you're seeing in the Hurling League. It does have that phony war sense to it, whereas you take the football games this weekend, it just feels like there's a lot riding on it. There's so much jeopardy. Clare were very, very disappointed Saturday night, but it doesn't seem the kind of end of the world. But ultimately, it does kind of, for me, you know, not that there was much doubt, but it does kind of reaffirm kind of Limerick's number one credentials, and everyone else who played well over the weekend, you know, Tipperary and Cork, probably the main two you're probably looking at. Any bit of good form you're picking up at this time of year, it's all with the caveat for their followers. You're looking at it like, is this going to be enough to take down Limerick later in the year?
Yeah, 100%. We normally spend 15 minutes chatting about Tipp at the start, but we'll leave that to later. We go straight into Limerick, Fintan. I suppose you said new faces that popped up. Micheál Houlihan, we've both seen him probably at club level for Kilmallock, and he's been impressive. But like, by God, did he take his chance the other night? Even someone like Adam English coming in wouldn't have figured him to be in maybe that kind of engine room and maybe work as well as he did the other night. He definitely probably put his hand up as well. Shane O'Brien, as you said too, as well as obviously the big names. The likes of Hegarty was unstoppable at times the other night as well. Keane Lynch, we saw glimpses of, you know, what Keane Lynch can do, but it's such a good sign of their strength in depth, isn't it, to have these new faces. And I know there was 5 or 6 kind of, you know, familiar enough faces let go, I think, in recent weeks as well. And they have these new faces to drive the thing forward. And that's a very worrying thing for Jason Pack, in the sense of they're not getting stale. These are all new guys coming in trying to stake a claim and, I suppose, raise standards even higher.
Yeah, and like, there's a point that I've thought, and now I'm not saying this is a weakness in Limerick's side, but if you look at the starting 15, it hasn't changed much over the course of the All-Ireland winning. And a lot of it is based on the under-21 winners across 2015 and 2017. So a lot of that's the 26 to 28 age bracket now. So I have been kind of wondering the last maybe year or so. Obviously, they've been dominant, so maybe people are probably thinking this is maybe kind of an irrelevant point to make. But I'm just wondering who's the next generation that is coming. And I just wonder, is Kylie starting to think of that as well? When you look at, I would have seen them, and I know you were down there as well in the Munster Senior Hurling League. Thought Fergal O'Connor was quite good cornerback. He was full back in the 20s last year. Shane O'Brien, as we said. So they're starting to try and bring guys through from the other 20s last year. They got to the other final. But I suppose to pick up on a point you made, Houlihan is probably the one that stands out just on Saturday night, because I suppose there was 2 facets to his game. First of all, he had 3 points on the board from play within 7 minutes. And it was literally just his lateral running across the half-forward line. Clare couldn't really seem to get a handle on it. Who was meant to be kind of picking him up, and he was getting into these pockets of space. And his striking is really, really good, as we both would have seen with Kilmallock. And then David Reedy went off in the 7th minute, and you look, Aaron Gann was involved Saturday night. Tom Morrissey's on the bench. Dermot Burns isn't there. Reedy goes off injured, so you're looking around going, who's going to be the free taker? But again, we would have seen him. Houlihan is brilliant at club level. You know, I went back and I looked at it, like, he got 11 points in the 2021 Limerick County final, and he got 11 points against Middleton the following day in the Munster Club semi. So, you know, that's, look, it is a step up, but that's a pretty elite level of club hurling that he's been playing at. And I mean, I was trying to check it out. Like, his underage career, he was under 21 in 2018 when they didn't win anything. I haven't been able to kind of spot anything else that he kind of would have done. So maybe it's not as easy for him to make the launch pad, but he actually missed first 2 of his first 3 frees, actually. Not straightforward ones, but he did miss them. But after that, he potted absolutely everything else. And I think you pointed out on Twitter on Saturday night, and it struck me as well, like the pass before English's assist for the goal was just the kind of a guy who was just, his confidence was just flying high at that stage. And maybe that goal kind of summed things up for Limerick in terms of his flick. It's English's run, and English was a guy I would have thought is just kind of an inside forward. But as you said, he was the guy Kylie turned to 8 minutes into come into midfield and get involved in the midfield engine room. And then Donegal Dálaigh, who has played Limerick under 20, but I think really, to be honest, it's on the back of Mona Lean's form, winning the All-Ireland club title. He's after getting thrown into the senior fray. And he had missed a couple of chances, but in fairness, he took the goal well. So it is that extra layer. I think they'd probably be a little disappointed, Fergal O'Connor had to go off with a head injury. I think they would have liked to have had a good look at him over the whole game. I think he looks a good prospect, but he was gone after half an hour. Kieran Barry was another player. So, and obviously then Shane O'Brien is probably different to Houlihan in the sense that he's his clubmate, but I don't know about you, but he's the kind of guy I've been kind of hearing about for a while. I mean, he was in school last year, so he's one of the...
He's a big lad for his age, isn't he?
Unbelievable,
he's a big lad for his age, yeah.
I think he's one of the kind of precocious talents. I'm not saying he's going to get to the level of Cian Lynch, but Cian Lynch that kind of went straight from school, straight into the Limerick senior setup. The interesting Cork, obviously, with his father involved, is the S&C coach with Clare, and he's had...
Yeah, did you see him in the huddle beforehand? Like, I just thought it was hilarious. He was the one doing the team talk. There was no other management in there, and his young fella's about 60 yards away down the far end.
Yeah, I hadn't actually seen that part of it, but I just thought it was an interesting one. And then I was actually thinking, I was looking on the line, there's someone else on the sideline who would have had that experience in Alan Cunningham, who's with Limerick. He would have actually, when Aaron was breaking through, his son with Clare, he was with Offaly, I think, at the time, and it was a fairly important kind of a promotion playoff. And I think Aaron Cunningham was talking at the time about it, and then he said the father didn't tell him he was going in with Limerick, and he noticed him going out the door one night with the green... he looked at the bag, or he looked at the top or something like that. And that's when he kind of found out he was gone in with Limerick, But O'Brien looks superb. He's just really lively, kind of has an eye for a goal. And I think Limerick need this extra kind of a layer of options, And obviously, we can get to maybe in a minute, but obviously the old guard, there were some pretty promising signs there in terms of their kind of early season form as well.
Big time. And it's funny, Galan isn't at the edge of the square at the moment, and so they've kind of almost I don't know, they've shifted their game plan a small bit, I think, as well. I don't think they play the ball into the inside line as much now, and they tend to shoot from maybe out the pitch. But I thought there was a massive contrast in tactically how the two teams were playing the other night. I thought Limerick were working the ball the whole time, and it was always head up, and it was trying to give the best ball, and if the ball was going inside, it was always a sympathetic ball inside, where I don't know, I thought Clare were quite rudderless and kind of one-dimensional. I know they got a bit of joy off the Duggan flick down for the Galvin goal, but the ball going into the forward line just wouldn't cut it until maybe David Reedy came on and showed a good bit of energy. But I thought there was a clear kind of clash in styles of how the two of them were playing, and I know there's more than one way to skin a cat, and the way to beat Limerick might necessarily be to play like them, but I just thought it was very one-dimensional in contrast. And you mentioned it briefly earlier, from a Clare point of view, it would have been a really disappointing out, and obviously they drew with them 3 times last year. It wasn't until extra time that Limerick were able to pull away in the Munster final, and it was a bit of you'd have to say it was a bit of a no-show the other night, really.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was saying to someone afterwards, it was the greatest 6-point hammering I'd seen at the weekend, and we'll get into it, but there was a bit of a theme of that at the weekend, wasn't there? If you look at Kilkenny, Galway and Clare in particular, we're all losing heavily. In fairness to Galway, I suppose it was 14 men, and they've been very competitive in the first half, so maybe it's a different type of a game. But all three kind of made it come back. Kilkenny lost by 6, having been down by 12, I think it was. Clare, I think I had it here, the scoreline was, 56 minutes in, Tom Morrissey scores, it's 26 points to 1-9. And it felt like Limerick, pulled up the handbrake a bit, a little bit at that stage, Reedy obviously made a big difference. Aidan McCarthy, fairness to him, got a lot of points, and he was probably their best player on the day. But one of the things I noticed was the difference in the work ethic without the ball of the two respective forward lines. I mean, Clarefax coming out of defence, particularly in the first half, were getting absolutely savaged in possession. Yeah. Peter Casey's hunger for that part of the game was unbelievable, I thought. Obviously, he's if they kind of leave the two inside, he's the tip, he comes out a little bit, So Flanagan and O'Brien, especially O'Brien, were kind of urged to stay close to goal. But Casey looks so kind of hungry for that kind of work. Houlihan, in fairness, getting stuck in. And obviously Hegarty was kind of his usual self, just all over the pitch.
He's got even deeper this year, Fintan, I think, isn't he? Like, he's down under 21 like regularly. It's almost like he's starting moves back there now. It makes him even harder to mark. Makes him even harder to be man marked, I'd say, as well.
This was Hegarty you're on about. Yeah, no, absolutely. But like, he's still getting through. I mean, he scored a point in the first half, which basically was in the back of a turnover. Clare getting caught coming out of bit of the defence after a short puck out, and he lashes in a ball that's basically just whistles over the crossbar, you know. So he looked in kind of really, really good shape.
Would have been goal. That could have been goal of the year if that had gone in, yeah.
And like, I suppose you think about this time last year, it's the second game they lost to Galway. He got sent off. Look, didn't matter by the end of the year. He was still absolutely sensational in the championship, but probably glad for him. He'll probably be glad himself that it's kind of a really, really strong kind of start to the season. But just what Kylie was saying afterwards, I think the third quarter was the thing. Given the standards that they're at, they would have been pretty disappointed. They only scored 6 points in the whole of the second half in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. As I said, in the first 20 minutes of the second half on Saturday night, they scored 10 points. So they put the game to bed. And I mean, from a Clare point of view then, I went back and I looked at the stats. Like, if you look back at last year's Munster final, the kind of absolute classic that it was. Shamie Flanagan scores 8 points in play. Clare kept him scoreless the other night. Galan isn't there. He scores 10. So that's 18 points you've kept out of the equation. But they still leaked 127. And at that, I mean, Limerick only scored 1-1 in the last 15 minutes. I mean, it was a very lifeless game, to be honest with you. You know, like, I was looking forward in terms of, I thought, kind of after what they served up last year, kind of near neighbours, you know, Saturday night, kind of nice weather and all that. You know, you good enough crowd in, 15,000 in fairness, you know, but it just never really got going. And I know, in fairness, Clare were without a few big names, but so were Limerick. But obviously, I suppose Clare, the importance of Conlon, Kelly, O'Donnell to Clare compared to, I mean, Limerick, obviously, you know Mike Casey, you know Will O'Donoghue, you know Galan, trying to think, sorry, Tom Morrissey was started on the bench. Dan Morrissey actually was another player I thought of the older brigade, looked really, really kind of just up for it, you know, like was really, really physical in defence, really kind of manning that. And then Hayes just came along with these kind of different efforts, you know, different flashes of genius. He scored the second point of the game. And then he came out after half time and in 60 seconds scored 2 points, one off either side, you know. And then like even Morrissey, like they bring on Tom Morrissey, established player, first 2 shots from play, puts them both over the bar, you know. So it's just this ability to just kind of flick the switch and turn it on, you know. And Clare couldn't cope. But yeah, it's a 6 point hammering. I mean, it really was kind of bizarre when we were leaving, like, to reflect how was there 6 points in that, you know.
Yeah, and Kylie almost has a stick to beat Limerick with now because of the fact that they probably didn't perform in the last 15 or 20 minutes.
And he referenced it straight away afterwards.
Yeah, that was all he was focusing on. It's almost like, because he's not happy with 50 or 55 minutes. He's only happy with 75 to 80 minutes.
And even I tried to ask him about Houlihan, you know, I was trying to say, you know, I thought he was the story of the night, really, you know, obviously. And the name is so synonymous with Limerick hurling, and I suppose he's a late bloomer, you know, he's not one of these kind of identical Limerick hurlers who's won All Ireland 21s, been with Ardskull and just kind of rolled off almost the conveyor belt, you know. And straight away he was like, look, he was one of a number of fellas who did well tonight. He did well, but can he do it again? That's the challenge. So straight away it's like, you know, I'd say he got the RT man of the match. I don't know, did they get a little trophy? But I'd say once he got back to the dressing room, he'd have been told put that away. You know, there's no sense of getting carried away with yourself. You know.
Yeah, I think it's from the Brian Cody school. I think where he actually don't mention the player by name as well.
Yeah.
Where he's just, and you talk.
But it's so similar, isn't it? The traits.
Yeah. Yeah, big time. That was the one thing I noticed. That Houlihan actually gave a good interview to RT after, where he talked about how enjoyable the setup was, and he said, you know, it's tough, but it's really enjoyable. And I suppose lads like that breathing new energy into a setup are great as well. Just fly through a few comments. We have loads of comments in. Thanks a million for all their comments. Joe Butler just says, congrats to Tipp yesterday. They were excellent and fully deserved their win. Their movement and off-the-shoulder support play was very evident, and they created many goal-scoring opportunities. They surely did. Joe Butler just says, Tipp's first touch was much superior, and their ability to break the first tackle allowed them to create the space for colleagues. He's just talking about Kilkenny here. Kilkenny pressed the self-destruct button on too many occasions with their laissez-faire style or type style of play in the first half, waiting on stuff to happen instead of making it happen. And of course, shocking passing. Adrian McGrath, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, says, will Limerick be the third team in Munster after Cork and Tipp? No doubt they will contest all 4 finals, Munster League to the All-Ireland. I presume he's referring to Tipp there and referring to our regular host. Richard Hogan just says, thank God he's off. I echo those sentiments, Richard, particularly this morning. I think he was up watching a bit of the Super Bowl last night as well. And TV Street says, Shane is busy painting the front wall blue and saffron because Tipp are back. We might as well get into Tipp, Fintan. I know you probably didn't see no more than myself, you didn't see the game in full or in real time. But like, even, I think was it 2-12 to 7 points at half time?
2-13, yeah.
2-13, yeah. Jake Morris breaking the line. Callan, while not at full tilt, delivers a lovely pass across the forward, who makes a lovely sidestep, drills it to the net. It definitely looks like, I don't know if you've seen much of them in the flesh this year, but they do look a completely different prospect. It's amazing. It's not that often that you can see a manager's stamp or a coach's stamp on a team, but that Cahill Bevan stamp is so obvious in Tipp, and it was obvious from the first day. They look, I don't know, physically they look different even. It seems to be, it's amazing. You talk about like S&C programs and teams been on them for years and the benefits of it. They look like a different team conditioning wise, even in the 3 or 4 months they've been back training. But it's that kind of breaking the line and, you know, that craving for goals, the Cahill had. I think did they hit 8 against Wexford in the under-20 All-Ireland semi-final one year, and then 5 in the final against your own Cork. There's just a manic energy and a craving for work and a craving for goals, and they already look a different prospect, with the caveat that league is league, obviously.
Yeah, no, it does. It does have a good sense, a good feel to it for them, you know. It's simplistic, maybe, the goals thing, but I think it showed a bit at the weekend with a couple of teams. Probably get into Cork in a minute. I know you were there, I think. But with Tipp, definitely there was a sense of hunting that. I mean, look, the stats stand out. You mentioned the 8 goals against Wexford. That was in Nolan Park. His Waterford team, last year's league semi-final against Wexford, that was Nolan Park. Did they get 4 or 5? I can't really remember.
5, I think, yeah, 5. Yeah.
The finals that they've won, the 2 under-20 and under-21, I think got 3 against Cork and one of them 5 in another. So look, it is a trait. One of the things I thought was interesting, I suppose, is that everyone, you know, I've been kind of guilty of this myself, but a lot of people are kind of focusing on the young players coming through, and they're obviously thinking, you know, Cahill has worked with them. That sort of kind of relationship and that kind of know-how and knowledge will kind of surface at senior level. But you kind of see the older brigade then maybe that they can be re-energized with kind of a new coaching setup. And as you say, the way Callan gathers the ball, he kind of draws in the cover, the way Ford has gone inside, and that's 2 of the most experienced players that have been around for a good few years now. And that's the way they combine for the goal. It kind of broke the game open a little bit, if you know what I mean, in the first half. Yeah. And then obviously, you know, Ford like finishes with 115. And, you know, usually you look at Ford's total of 115 and you're thinking, you know, a huge amount from frees. But in fairness, like he got 1-5 from play, scored an unbelievable sideline, looks in really, really good shape. Obviously, Morris gets 1-2, Noel McGuy gets 2 points. So that's like 3 guys who've been around from, you know, well, the two other lads have been around for a good while. Morris was there in 2019 as well, like, you know, so that part of it is kind of really encouraging. You're probably looking then at kind of the next wave kind of what's coming. So Johnny Ryan at cornerback, the Campions, both getting game time, Enda Heffernan. Alan Tynan, I think, is a really interesting one. I don't know about you, like, but he's had a pretty unique kind of sporting career in terms of key for the football and hurling in 2015, the minor. Wins the Schools Cup with Roscrea that year in rugby, then goes, he definitely went Munster. I don't know that he have a little bit with Connacht, I'm not totally sure. But he's in a Munster Academy for 4 years, but now kind of slips back into this and kind of buys into it. And even, did you see the time in the first half, or sorry, it was the second half when Conor Bowe wins a free, and the amount, like, they're all in, like, obviously the goal thing, but they're all in, like, you know, like, he scores 2 points in play and he's running wild, but I mean, like, it felt like that was like the part of the game that they really kind of looked at, you know. So I haven't seen him live yet this year, but there is definitely a sense of a kind of a strong kind of feel to it, you know. And again, it's just interesting that both them and Limerick win by 6 points, but it just feels like far, far more dominant kind of displays, you know. Little things I think are probably no harm for them. The stat that they hadn't won in 15 years, hadn't won in Nolan Park, you know. Not obviously, but all these things, when you hear how long it's taken a team to win in a stadium, you always think of how many times they'd actually played there. I always remember in 08, Sheedy talking for months about we haven't won in Páirc Uí Chaoimh in 80 years. And they won there. But I mean, it was like a big thing for him. And then you wonder how many times did they actually games is that doing? But that sort of stuff can maybe seep into players. So I wonder, was that something maybe a little thing Cahill had kind of thrown during the week, but definitely I think that they'll be happy. Kind of that's a kind of a good start to the league between the Laois game and that yesterday.
It's funny you say that. I remember when Galway beat Kilkenny in Nolan Park. It was Kilkenny's first championship defeat in Nolan Park, and and like you're just thinking, just really how many times have they actually played in Nolan Park in championship?
Exactly, they play all their championship games up the road in Croke Park, but that's the kind of yeah.
It's funny though. But just from a Tipp point of view, like after disastrous 2022, and I think it's funny because Cahill has like serious previous in this regard. Like Waterford were on the floor probably when he took over at the start of 2020, and he got a bounce from them straight away. They obviously beat Cork in that Munster semi-final, ran Limerick close, and ended up all the way back into the All-Ireland final. But he has this thing of where he's able to get an immediate bounce out of a team. He's able to get an immediate reaction out of them. And you say there, all the young players that he worked with at minor and 21 and 20, we knew they were going to have a great relationship. But he has re-energized. Like Ford looks re-energized again. Noel McGrath is flying it. We hadn't seen Callan all year. He was bouncing. Rona Maher was bouncing as well. He's put Michael Breen back at the edge of the square. It remains to be seen whether that'll work as a long-term project.
The Shane Saint call about 5 years on, he finally gets his way, because did you see the stat that it was like Breen had scored 2-8 or 2-9 the last time they played in Nolan Park?
The last time they played, I think Callan was the only one going back to that 2008 win as well. That his longevity is unbelievable, really, when you think about it. But if he's able to keep all those experienced players fit, like Callan wasn't fit last year, and he's able to blend it with youth and blend it with athleticism and pace, you'd have to say they are an interesting prospect. And it's almost like as the weeks go by in the league, Munster gets even more interesting every week. Cork have put their head up, Tipp have put their head up, and obviously Limerick have showed that they're not going away. But it's a bit away. But like trying to predict that top trio of Munster is just you could probably change your opinion every week on it realistically.
Yeah, look, I think it's Limerick plus 2. I think most people will go with, but I think it'll be very, very difficult for anyone to have much confidence in kind of picking that other two for definite. The thing about Tipperary I'll be interested in though as the weeks go on is how hard they keep going at it, because look, nobody knows more than Cahill and Bevins about how a good league does not translate into a good provincial championship given what happened to them last year. And the way the schedule falls for them, 2 weeks after the league final, they're away in Ennis. So, are they going to keep going hard at it? Like the schedule now, they've Dublin next on the Saturday the 25th in Croke Park, and then they have Waterford on the 11th of March. Then they have the last game against Antrim. This is going to be an issue for the league, I think, as it goes on. I think we can kind of enjoy it up to about kind of mid-March, but then after that, how much we're going to be able to believe of what we're seeing. Like you mentioned the likes of keeping guys fit, like Callan, Noel McGrath. Is he going to be kind of managing their load, that it's all that they're going to be peaking come the 23rd of April, because then Tipp have 2 weeks off before they chop the Cork. Like they're actually away for their first 2 games, which is going to be pretty challenging for them. And then they finish with 2 games in kind of the space of 7 days at home in Thurles, So I'd love to know, and I imagine something that's exercised Cahill the whole time. We will not have a repeat of last year. And that if they are to keep going, it'll be an unbelievable feat to manage to maintain that kind of level and go straight from the league into the championship. But look, he'll know. You mentioned 08, that was when they won the league. It was Callan's kind of breakthrough year to beat Galway in the Gaelic grounds. And that was Sheedy's first year. Sorry, they got a good bounce as well off that. But obviously at that time, you won the league and you had a good long break until the championship kind of kicked in, So I'd be kind of fascinated to see what they kind of do. And stuff like Breen full back, is that kind of a long-term thing? It does seem like it, or it does seem like that's the plan anyway, that's something that they're kind of looking at. I suppose you do still have, Heffernan's out for the year, isn't he?
And Craig Morgan,
You're looking at Craig Morgan. Johnny Ryan, there's probably a cornerback kind of slot has come up for grabs there. Barrett went off yesterday. I think he collided with one of his own teammates. Cadell went off, so James Kennedy comes off the bench. So there's probably 2 or 3 kind of defensive spots there up for kind of a couple of the younger brigade for kind of grabs. I think he wants to put Runner Maher in the half-back line. You kind of get the sense of that, doesn't he? Like that he doesn't want to kind of leave it like, and you see this sometimes, managers will come in and they'll just, from the very, very start, it's noticeable, right, that's where you are for the year now to some experienced player. And then it's up to the kind of younger brigade to come and go for it then. But yeah, it's a positive start. He'll be pretty happy with how things are going.
From a Kilkenny point of view, obviously they had that kind of usual never say die and came back. But and they made it very competitive. I think it was down to 4 at one stage. But like Derek Lyng's not exactly going to be pushing the panic button given the personnel that they're missing realistically. But like if you take TJ Owen Cody and Adrian Mullen out of any team, you're probably going to be under pressure, aren't you? But they were definitely a step off it yesterday.
Yeah, that's the phrase he used afterwards. He just said standing off in the first half. I mean, in fairness, I think their second half fight back was a little bit more pronounced than Clare's. Clare's definitely had a feel to Limerick, as I said earlier, pull up the handbrake, and Clare went for it for the last 15 minutes, really came off the bench, made a big difference. I mean, Kilkenny, they only got one goal, but like they obviously created a couple of chances. Donnelly, Barry Hogan produced a really good save off him, and then Martin Keoghan eventually got the goal, and there was definitely more kind of fight to them. Even like, did you see the way before the goal that they scored? Billy Ryan catches the ball and he actually floors his own teammate in the process of doing it. And gets the ball inside. Like, there just was that more aggression and that extra kind of little bit of intensity in the second half, whereas you kind of stand off and you give Tipperary a lot of space, and the likes of Ford, Morris, McGrath, in terms of picking out passes or putting the ball over the bar, they're just going to punish you at will. And next year look at 12 points. So I think he'll be happy kind of with the fight back. If there's one kind of positive, I guess, over the last week, I would say Billy Drennan is probably a big one in terms of, the undoubted kind of star that on the 20 All-Ireland final win, someone that he knows very, very well. Like if you look at it then, like, I think it's fair enough to say there's a little bit of a Fitzgibbon issue here, maybe, like Cian Kenny comes off, he had a big game during the week, Blanchfield only comes on. Two of them, you imagine, will come into the fray. Obviously, as you said, the Ballyhale contingent, Corcoran is the only one, but they probably want to look at Corcoran a bit more than the other ones. They're probably going to manage the load, you imagine, of the kind of forwards and kind of have a look at further down the line, So I think Butler went off injured. It's probably a little bit of a concern. Not sure, a lot of these cases you're kind of looking at it and you're just saying, you're not exactly sure how kind of serious these things are, like, but you see even a ligament damage injury. You see Robbie O'Flynn last week, suddenly it's 6 to 8 weeks out, and just with the new structure and all that, it can be a bit more problematic, and he was so good for them last season. So not exactly sure what the nature of that is, So I think it'll be hardened by the second half. Look, he said there's a lot of kind of new faces and a lot of kind of guys that he's just starting to get a look at, and he's brought up from the under 20 and all that, So I think you're right in saying definitely not the panic button, but I'd say the first half will be the one that'll be honed in on when they're kind of inspecting the footage of this.
Without a doubt, yeah. Just a couple of comments in there. Richard Hogan just says KK were sloppy mistakes for both first half goals. Short, Mullen and Cody is huge. Yeah, Adrian actually didn't play for DCU during the week, so that hamstring injury that kept him out of the club final was obviously serious enough. I'm sure he'll be back over the coming weeks. TV Street says, will we end up with a league final with 2 second teams in it? Depend. Like Cork have 3 weeks, I think, to their first Munster game. So if they were to get to a league final, maybe it kind of suits them a little bit more. There's a good comment in here from Sean O'Sullivan. Knew a lad who scored 2-8, 2-8, 2-0 in 3 consecutive matches. We called him the Owl. Very good. Very good. In fairness, there's a bit of talk put into that. Adrian McGrath says Tipp are still nowhere near a secure defence with a balance between power and pace to cope with pace up front against them. It's not relevant in these conditions. I think there's such a difference between now and what you're going to face come championship, and that's why it's hard to make a definitive read maybe on what you're seeing. But I know you saw Cork yesterday, Fintan, and you're a proud Cork man. My question would have been coming into the game was, they had a brilliant second half performance against Limerick. Can they back it up and then back it up again? And like they were 1-9 to 1-4 down yesterday, looked in a small bit of trouble and turned things around fairly spectacularly. We're back level at half time, 2-3 to no score then in the opening 2 to 3 minutes of the second half, and Oisin Salmon gets the second yellow, and they were kind of coasting thereafter. Like considering they're missing Hoggy, Damien Callahan, another experienced player, both of them were ruled out before the start, and a couple of new faces stand up. I'd say you're fairly enthused by it.
Yeah, I think it was some good stuff in it. Particularly I would say how clinical they were after halftime in that 5-minute patch. Probably not something you'd associate with them in terms of when they get a boost of, team gets man sent off, you get a couple of scores, and then they really kind of went for the kill a bit. It felt, even the fact that looked to me like they're trying to manufacture goals a bit, which is a difference as opposed to the chances coming your way and going for them. I mean, even last week, the first goal, Dalton maybe has the chance to put the ball over the bar, but so does it in, gives it into Robbie O'Flynn. It's a goal. Yesterday, similar story. He paves the way for Lehan. His first goal, even Lehan's second goal, I know he was unchallenged, but you wouldn't have always seen this and associated with them. Instead of tapping the ball over the bar from 40 yards and taking a handy point, he kind of went in for the kill, and that probably settled it. I think that third goal for the game. Okay, I know that they got a fourth later on, and Galway came back at them with a couple of goals, which probably heartened Henry Shefflin. But look, I think they probably even more so than Cahill, or similar to Cahill in a way. It is very interesting to just look that it's Pat Ryan, and because of the success he had with the 20s and 21s, it's how many of these he's going to bring through, and that's what everyone's looking at. And can certain guys kind of stake a claim? And the interesting thing is that some guys that were kind of on the fringes before, pre-season or whatever, that they're getting kind of an extended run now. Like Conor O'Callaghan, cornerback, is probably one. Downey getting fullback for 2 games. Joyce at 6 probably isn't a surprise. I think he's been earmarked with a long, long way out. And he's really, really kind of taken to the field. Looks kind of almost bigger, kind of even more forceful in the position now. And then I suppose up front, Sean Toomey's been on the panel with a while. Probably hasn't got an extended run at it, but obviously he's been doing well for UCC at Fitzgibbon, well for his club. Dalton then is probably the interesting one. Wouldn't have worked with Ryan before. He was a goalkeeper at minor level in 15. He's from the same vintage, basically the same age group as Coleman at Fitzgibbon. Then a forward at 21. He came off the bench in the 2021 against Kilkenny and Limerick, and then had a foot injury after that, got in club championship. Was kind of rehabbing it last year, and then kind of didn't really get brought back onto the panel as the season kind of unfolded. His skill and his hurling and his striking is unquestioned. I suppose the question mark is the kind of mobility issue and the movement issue, but he definitely looked really, really hungry for it yesterday. So it's kind of a positive sign that way. The question is, I suppose, at Salt Hill on a February day, I don't know what it was like. You were there now, but on the pitch, it looked like a dead pitch, or on TV,
it was. It was cut up pretty bad, yeah.
So you just kind of further down the line, but definitely there was some very kind of positive signs for him in terms of kind of what he was able to bring to the team. And I thought in particular the way he created the goal. I mean, it wouldn't be something you'd always he's an absolute unbelievable finisher for his club, and he would have been at underage, but it's kind of seen that extra step of it. And then Lehan, it probably just strikes me as one that probably wasn't very influential in last week's game, and then gets a point near the end. But the fact that Ryan left him on for the whole game, is there a sense of, similar to Michael Breen with Tipperary, is it right, listen, Conor, you're going to get the spring at number 11, and you're going to get a chance to work your way into the game and all that, And I mean, again, he's a guy that Ryan wouldn't have worked with, but Ryan would have been manager of SARS, and he would have kind of seen firsthand what Lehan kind of had to offer, and there does seem to be a sense that they're kind of investing kind of faith and trust in him, and he gets a couple of goals that kind of rewards him, so different things like that are kind of producing. But at Cork have a lot of guys, I think, coming through at a similar kind of a level, and I guess it's how many a lot of guys with potential. You could definitely see a lot of them in a few years becoming established county seniors, but I guess it's how many can make the really kind of a rapid kind of a step up. And O'Callaghan 2, Downey at 3, and Roach at midfield are probably the 3 that are kind of, putting their hand up so far in the first 2 games. It'll be interesting to see how much they can kind of cement their places over the next few weeks, or even months. Fitzgibbon has to come back into that team from a shoulder injury. We think Coleman is going to be back at some stage. It doesn't look like he's ruled out for the year. Tim O'Mahony, all these established guys, when they come back in, what way the makeup of the team is going to be.
Yeah, definitely going to be interesting. There's a lot of big names to come back there, as you say. Pat Ryan just had a couple of comments actually on both Conor Lehan and Declan Dalton. He just said, if you look at Conor Lehan, he wasn't at his best last week against Limerick, but he tried like a dog. He scored 2-3 today, and we're just delighted with the attitude and character that our lads are given. Declan fought fierce hard. He's a fierce threat. He can score from anywhere. He's a great striker of the ball. The one thing he's doing, he's working fierce hard for us at the moment. He's brought that to his game. He's got himself in fantastic shape. Obviously, he was left off the panel last year, and he's a bit of a point to prove as well. Dalton striking, Fintan, it's a little bit unorthodox in a way, and I wonder, is it because he's a bigger man maybe, who wouldn't have had as much time on the ball maybe as other players? He almost leans away when he's striking, he like buys himself an extra half second not to be blocked down. Now he was blocked down by Crowd McInerney one effort at the end, but he leans back a small bit and he's
on the back foot, shot thing,
and a really economical striking. He hit 6 from play yesterday. As you say, the setup for Lahan's goal was like perfect. It was not to Lahan, it was to where Lahan was going to be. He didn't even have to check stride or anything like that. Now, from a Galway point of view, I'd say Henry Shefflin was looking at some of it through his hands. Like Lahan walked through at one stage, Toomey walked through at the end. I think Joseph Cooney was close by, and like, he didn't meet him until, you know, the ball was in the net. From Shefflin's point of view, I know he's down, you know, he's not his regular 3 in Dahi Burke, but he'd be disappointed enough at how porous they were at times. And I was even looking at it from the press box. Like Cork totally dragged out the Galway half back line. They had them out around the middle of the field, and it was just a matter of ball over the top, a nice ball into the forwards. And it was a tough day for Gerard McInerney and the lads inside, and they were kind of, to me, like they were kind of hung out to dry now. But Shefflin would definitely be like, that wouldn't be like, he played in a Kilkenny team where 5, 6 and 7 stood their ground nearly no matter what. So I'm sure that's something he'd be looking to address.
Yeah, they were like, especially because, you know, it looked like such a good start, you know, when you had like Nyland, Cooney and McManus all showing up well in attack, and then they get a goal. And as you said, I think it was a 1-9 to 1-4 at one stage. Kind of going in at half time, probably kind of pretty disappointed, I'd say, with a little bit of a slump before the break and how that game has suddenly become closer. And then obviously it just seemed to cave in for them in 10 or 15 minutes, like, and they were really, really kind of punished with the concession of the goals and kind of brought it back. Like at one stage, you did think, you were looking at it, was it 9 points in it? You were thinking they're a man down. This could be an absolute hiding that they're going to suffer here. But in fairness to them, they did bring it back. You know, with kind of further goals from McManus and Concannon, and obviously the penalty at the end. You know, so that was kind of heartening. Like the one thing I wonder, like these actually, I think, are the two sides that have the most players involved with Fitzgibbon at the moment. Like the University of Galway team, I think, is 14 Galway lads. A lot of them either starting or kind of involved on the fringes of the Galway panel, and similarly, some of them would have been involved with. So all these colleges' names are changing now, so I can't. Whatever.
Disaster! That's driving me bonkers. I'm calling them the old LIT or the old Cardiff.
No, I was just about to say the artists formerly known as GMIT were playing during the week. I think Keenan Fahy was playing for them, for example. So I think there might be an element of that. I think and Kevin Cooney were involved. I think he would have been conscious of that, but I think he'd be hardened by kind of the finish to the game. You still have a lot of recognisable names in the starting team, you know, Monaghan, Whelan, Flynn, as you said, the half back lines, Mannion, Cooney, Morrissey. There's no one kind of really new and kind of fresh there, like, you know, but I think it was the kind of space, and Cork were a little bit more direct. I know, did you think that, like, there was kind of a bit more control was being kind of fed in?
But clever directness, if you get me, as in trying to drag that Galway half back line out and then put the ball in rather than just being direct for the sake of being direct, you know?
Yeah, like they got to a certain point and then it was kind of going, you know. The one thing I do notice is that Joyce is a bit of a throwback with that. Like he does like to.
Oh yeah,
you know,
he loves it.
At times, like there was a couple of stages. I think it was one of the preseason games of that. A little bit kind of like open the shoulders from centre back and go for the point opportunity. But yesterday, I just kind of noticed it's a bit more kind of like long direct deliveries, and it is the angled diagonals. I mean, it is the Limerick template, you know. The two of them kind of going together to the one corner, and then they kind of feed off each other. You know, the Galan and Flanagan kind of movement, the way that works, you know, is the kind of trying to kind of aid that, you know. But probably disappointed from Galway with that defensively, I'd say, more so than anything, as opposed, and I've also been heartened with the kind of fight after. I think he was kind of positive, was he, with Burke afterwards, that he is kind of on the comeback trail, and you know, you kind of won't be seeing him before too long. St. Thomas wise, I imagine a couple more of them coming back into the fray. Was that the kind of vibe you were getting after?
Yeah, over the next couple of weeks, Fintan Burke, Dahi Burke, Conor Cooney. Yeah, there was lots of recognisable faces there yesterday, but I suppose lots of faces that kind of weren't there as well, familiar enough. I think Martin McManus is one player that stood out really well. And for an inside forward, kind of like Aaron Galan, he actually has a paw on him. He made a brilliant catch for Cooney's goal. I think he rode a tackle and then put a lovely pass inside from. He ended up at 1-3, kind of carried his Loughrea form into the county, which is hugely encouraging, I'd say, from Shefflin's point of view, when maybe not too many lads stood up the other day. Just the other game in Division 1, Group A, Wexford had a 2-23 115 win over Westmeath. They had a lot of wides again, but Darragh Egan was more heartened that they had chances rather than wides. He just said we'd be in a much worse place if we had 30 to 35 shots on goal. We'd nearly 50 today. We had 21 shots against Galway in the first 25 minutes. So we're owning the ball. Someday they're going to go over and we're going to absolutely blitz someone. And just from Joe Fortune's point of view, he's just talking about how Division 1 is tough going. He said, I'm not going to lie to you. I left Ennis dispirited. That's after their, was it 427 to 7 or 14 points lost the week before. In myself, in the group, about how hard it is to try and bring that next generation of players through. For teams like ourselves and some of the other teams trying to fight to stay in Division 1, it is very hard when you lose that calibre of players. So he's talking about a casualty list which includes Niall Mitchell, Angus Clark and Cormac Boyle, and I believe veteran Derek McNicholas, who has also stepped away. I think he's the longest, he was the longest serving inter-county hurler in the game. So talks of him stepping away, whether it's for a year or for retirement, but it's cutthroat in Division 1, isn't it? And for Westmeath, they're in that difficult spot. They're in the spot that they were in 2020, the spot that Offaly were in last year, where you're going to be on the receiving end of a few shellackings. Kind of, there's no point in saying any different. You're in the harder of the two groups as well.
You are, and the other thing is it's just a numbers game. Goes out here. I mean, I'm trying to think. I don't know how many senior hurling clubs is it in Westmeath. Is it kind of 6 to 7 in that pocket? Kind of around Mullingar.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the issue. Once you get a couple of injuries, how much you can absorb them. I mean, you know, we're talking about Shefflin able to ease the St. Thomas guys back into it. Okay, Kilkenny lose. You know, but Ling doesn't have the Ballyhale guys. But like, you know, he has enough kind of young guys coming up. You mentioned Horgan and Callan pulling out for Cork. The length of the kind of absentee list for Westmeath is just too extreme for them to be able to kind of absorb, you know, and it's just sustaining a performance so that like it's what was it 11-10 at half time yesterday, and they're not able to kind of keep it going. I would say two things. Wexford probably had a bit of a cause here. The memories of the draw last summer, in terms of kind of the way that worked, it was about, you know, let's not let it repeat of that, lads. Let's not squander a winning position here. Let's, you know, see it out to the line. And also the way they're scoring just absolutely fell off a cliff in the second half against Galway last week after probably a good first half. And I'd say they would have been very disappointed with that, because that was obviously a big occasion for them. The first league game under lights, big home expecting crowd after the kind of the excitement of that Walsh Cup game against Kilkenny. People would have been happy with the first half, and then, you know, I'm just watching on TV, like it was just one-way traffic in the second half when Galway kind of took over, you know. So the fact that they got a little bit better here, you know, the goals from Banville and MacDonald. I'm interested looking at it that like Banville comes on at half time, scores 3 points from frees. Chin had scored 4 points free. So obviously Chin free taker in the first half, Banville in the second half. But there's no other county, I think, that has this issue that they need to kind of get a handle on it as much, you know, and you saw elements of it last week against Galway. And it just feels that is tied into it's just an extra little bit of scoring inspiration is the thing they're going to need. Now, I know, Egan, it's a good point, in fairness. If you're creating that volume of chances, that is heartening. And at least you can just work on the conversion ratio, whereas it's harder if you're not creating them at all. It's like, you know, how are we going to have to manipulate space and attack, and like what's wrong with our running angles and all this sort of thing. I think there's more elements to it if you're not creating kind of as many chances, you know. But I think you'd be glad with the result. I think you'd be glad that the second half was a better increase in tempo than last week. But, you know, no more than any other county, there's still a couple of things there to work on, you know.
It's one thing creating all the chances, but some of them are probably forced and some of them probably aren't, you know, realistic high percentage shots. And it's grand saying, you know, we created whatever, but if 4 or 5 of those are, you know, speculative efforts from the middle of the park out around the sidelines, you know.
Well, it would be interesting, and I'm sure they do it, like to drill it down and see what's the actual breakdown, like as in how many are, like you say, pot shots from your half-back line in midfield, and how many then are maybe, I don't know, shots inside the 45 or 50-yard line from your forward line that are missed, like, you know. That is a good point, Dory. Because I mean, there are times like a cornerback could like land a ball from his own 45, and, you know, sometimes that technically is down as a wide, like, you know, and you're looking at it going, well, you know, or a long delivery that evades a corner forward and goes wide as well.
Yeah. The worst kind. Waterford had a 231 to 219 win over Laois. They played nearly the whole game with only 14 men. Mikey Kiley was sent off for an off-the-ball incident in the first half. Neil Montgomery really stood up. He hit 1-3 from play. thought he was borderline for steps for the goal, but it's mad when you have advantage. When you have advantage, it's almost like an unwritten rule that you get an extra 3 or 4 steps. So he'd been fouled and the hand was out. So it's almost like you get a grace of an extra couple of steps in that kind of instance. Ryan Malani hit 2-2 from play from a Laois point of view. This was really competitive for long stages. I don't know if you saw much of this, but the bits I saw of it was almost like, obviously this wasn't the case, but it almost looked like Laois wanted to play 14 versus 14. Some of the tackling was just up around the head, just, you know, treading a really, really thin line here. But it was a better showing from a Laois point of view. I suppose from Waterford's point of view, playing with 14 men for what, he was sent off in the 6 minutes. So playing the next 64 with 14 men and finishing with 231 was impressive. Fintan, I have to ask you, what do you think about the man behind the wire?
It's pretty interesting. I wasn't aware of it as a concept until last week when you were kind of talking about it. Then I've seen some kind of suggestions that this was in use with Wexford. I know, did you go into that?
Yeah,
that, like,
no, it was before, yeah, with Mark Fanning, yeah.
They used to be in different parts of the ground and all that kind of thing. Like, you know, if there's one thing, I think there's been various elements throughout his coaching career. Davey does kind of think outside the box, and he does kind of use these different types of ploys, you know, and he does, you know, kind of put everything into it in terms of kind of thinking about kind of different things and different ways to work. How much benefit it has in the far field in Dungarvan compared to Croke Park on a big championship day, I don't know as much, to be honest, and maybe it's easier as well in Portlaoise on a Saturday night in February when there isn't exactly kind of many there in terms of kind of information that's feeding into him, you know. But interesting the amount that he got off his bench. If this was what the man was telling him, you know, that we kind of need some kind of reinforcements to come in. That was the thing, like 11 points off your bench.
Serious, yeah.
And it probably shows as well the strength and depth that a top county like that has in comparison to a Laois or Westmeath, and how much that can be influential in kind of dictating a game, you know, when it comes to the last quarter. The other thing that surfaced for me here, I think this is the start of like a very confusing time for hurling people. With Waterford, we have Patrick Fitzgerald and Patrick Fitzgerald both coming into the fray. Both absolutely brilliant prospects. Like I know everyone's been going on about Patrick Fitzgerald, and he is absolutely superb from Ballygunner, and he's from the best club in Munster at the moment in hurling. Let alone the best club in Waterford. And then you Patrick Fitzgerald from a more football-orientated club, generally Kilrossenty, but looks a really, really good prospect. And talking to a couple of people that have been working with him, he's rated really, really highly. Ruben Halloran came off the bench as well. He was pretty impressive, like I was seeing before Christmas. One of the few times Ballygunner have lost something at underage level in the under-20 in Waterford, and he was very, very good in the divisional final. And then I think I'm not sure the exact figure, but in the under-20 county final anyway last year in Waterford, he scored Deise entire tally in the whole game.
Yeah, that's right,
as they won it. So that's 3 forwards, 2 Fitzgeralds and Halloran. Interesting how many of them can come into the fray. Obviously, Pork Manny's, okay, he wouldn't have been a regular starter maybe last year, but he's obviously retired now. Is there a gap for 1 or 2 of those to kind of come into the fray? And, you know, Davey isn't afraid to kind of throw young guys in. You think back to his first time in charge, he put Brian O'Halloran as an 18-year-old,
that's right, yeah.
18-year-old into starting an All-Ireland semi-final. So I'd be interested to see of those 3 who he kind of works with over the next couple of weeks, a couple of weeks and months. It kind of simply starts to commit to a starting place. But I'm predicting confusion ahead for the likes of us, Bernie, when it comes to which P. Fitzgerald has done well, like, you know.
Yeah, I don't like the fact that that Patrick Fitzgerald looks a bit too much like Deise Hutchinson as well, and they both wear white helmets. Like, there should be a rule where there can't be 2 lads in the one line wearing the same helmet, but listen, that's another thing. Just a quick one, Davey had a comment on the man behind the wire who was, I don't know if you saw the Buff Egan's video about the bouncers ejecting him. I find it comical how he calls the stewards bouncers. I think it's absolutely brilliant. But he just says, so there was a mentor from David Fitzgerald's backroom team. I believe he was involved with him in Wexford as well. He was behind the goals in both halves, and David just says, it's not for puckouts. I will totally refute that completely, he remarked. To get messages to the far side of the field is nearly impossible. So I can get a message from behind the goals to the cornerback. He will give it out to the wing back. We were able to do stuff. I can't understand why a steward is trying to move him. I just don't understand that. They want me off the field, not coming on, trying to make switches. All I'm trying to do is be innovative and come up with different ways around it so you can make a change. So if you want to make a change, you can make a change. Yeah, there is an odd puck out here and there that we might have a call on. but that is just telling him something we see from the stand. Normally, a Mayor Forna would run up to the goals and say, listen, we need to get the ball here and there. We can't do that anymore. I don't see it as any bad thing, to tell you the truth. In effect, he is passing a message on and just making a change. That's it. Listen, I think I like the Mayor Forna. I think it adds something to the game. I like seeing Paul Kinnerk run onto the pitch. I like seeing, remember, Dublin were having a bit of a meltdown against Kerry in the drawn game in 2019, and see Jason Sherlock coming in, and all of a sudden the tactic. I like that because it brings more characters into the game. I wouldn't be mad on a fella on the terrace with a headset relaying stuff that's my own opinion. I just don't like it. I don't know. I don't think it's in the spirit of the game, but I do think people are probably going to have to be creative to get their messages around onto the pitch.
He's been very vocal with this now for a good while. Like, he's been, like, him and Kylie, to be honest, have been two that have been really against the fact that this hasn't been brought in. I suppose it's difficult enough for a GA. It's the tension between, there is obviously a deficiency in terms of managers not being able to kind of communicate with the players, and they're able to get around this, I suppose, during COVID when we had the water breaks in every quarter. They were able to kind of look into it. But I suppose there was incidents where it needed to be tidied up. You think of the Davy one in Nolan Park and the Gregory Kennedy one probably being the two that kind of stand out. And then on a more subtle level, there was, I think Eamon Fitzmaurice had a line, he described Tony McEntee was a good man to kind of drag his arse slowly off the pitch. Like, you know, McEntee used to, and it was, teams were doing this, you know, he used to, when he was at Mayo, I suppose allegedly, and I suppose kind of looking at it, you know, kind of fill that space.
He had a few of them, yeah, I remember. There was certain different Mayor Ford is filling that space in football in particular. When a keeper look up,
exactly, yeah. So it is a kind of a difficult one. Like, do you bring it back in and trust teams will kind of abide by it and use it for the spirit that it's intended? Let's face it, teams are going to push rules to the boundaries, and they got to manipulate stuff. But I would have sympathy for in the point he's making. It is very, very difficult. Like, if you lose a game narrowly and you're looking back on it, all it would have taken in your eyes maybe was a couple of small little positional things. I mean, you know, Vernie, look, I don't, you're the one that's played at the high level. I mean, trying to hear the guy next to you in a high octane kind of championship game, you know, big crowd in Croke Park or Portlaoise or wherever, you know, is very, very difficult. Like, so it is tricky, but I think whatever he's going to try and keep doing, whatever different ways he can to try and get messages across.
Yeah. The other game in Division 1, Dublin had a 28 points to 219 win over Antrim. Micheál Donoghue was just talking about the Dubs after. He just said it's a new team and they're trying to create their own identity. With that, it's been well documented the amount of lads that have changed since last year. I think it's 10 in total. The younger lads that have come in have done really well. Through the Walsh Cup and through the league, we have to develop the squad depth, and you have to give lads the evidence or experience of playing at intercounty level. With that, there's going to be, you know, you might be in a strong position, but with that inexperience, you just have to trust lads to go out and hurl. That they're going to make mistakes, but that's the only way they're going to learn. I think Donald Burke ended up with 5 from play, 10 frees. Chris O'Leary, who's from your own stock down in Cork, at 3 points. He was good today. I saw him in the Walsh Cup as well. I think they did 10 different scores. A lot of different lads on the score sheet there. No goals, which is probably a bit of a worry. But Keelan Mully hit 2-1 for Antrim. Colin Cunning ended up with 6. I think 3 from play as well. Neil McManus with 3 from play too. Competitive again from Antrim, but probably just disappointed. Like, they've been close to getting results. They're a really competitive Division 1 team at the moment. But Darren Gleeson just said, it's easy for me to focus on the last 15 or 20 minutes, which was very good by all accounts. That would be the easy out. But what happened in the preceding 50 wasn't up to what we're looking for. No real intensity. We didn't have a glove on them physically in the middle sector of the field. Dublin dictated the middle of the field. We had a few changes, like Conal cutting out to the middle of the field, and Paul Boyle brought some good energy. While Joe Maskey brought a focal point after that in attack. But prior to that, it was just disappointing. Probably from a Dublin point of view, just happy to get a result. I'd imagine when you're blooding lads like this is like it wouldn't be fair to say that Antrim are a banana skin. They're a lot more than that. But just to get a result and get new lads on the pitch from Donoghue's point of view is probably pleasing. Yeah,
and like the previous week, they didn't beat Waterford, and I think that would have been disappointing. Not the way you would have said beforehand. If you're going down to Dungarvan, you get some nerve, you've been happy with that. But ultimately, when Waterford had 13 men, not being able to kind of finish out the the game and managed to get something out of that. Probably maybe close it off would have been a slight disappointment. So if you didn't win if you didn't win at the weekend, then you've only 1 point from your first 2 games, whereas now like 3 from 2 is probably a good start for them. Probably became a little too tight for comfort for them, more than they would have wanted. But O'Donnell, Conor Burke, Donald Burke, and obviously those ones you kind of mentioned are kind of very, very promising. Like Antrim, like Gleeson had a comment afterwards, like he says, I'd love to know why this is happening in terms of kind of second half, first half kind of slow out of the blocks. And this is a contrast with Westmeath, very competitive for the first half and then fade away. Laois probably a bit similar in the way they were 2 points up in the third quarter. But it's probably good from Antrim's point of view, and it is heartening the way they kind of thundered back into it. And I don't know, it kind of feels that they've maybe I know they were in the Joe McDonagh last year and they won it, but kind of compared to Laois Westmeath, maybe a little bit small bit more, maybe a small bit higher level now in terms of you look at what Dunloy did, and there's just maybe other signs that maybe they can be a little bit kind of more competitive in that way. But obviously when you're not managing to be, I suppose, in the game, you're giving yourself too much to do, really. You're leaving it kind of too much to kind of build up on. So that's, I'd say, a second week of kind of moral victory is kind of pretty kind of useless for them, Dublin, I think it's just going to be a very kind of a change model, in terms of younger players coming through and a lot of experienced guys gone away, Chris Cummey and these sort of guys, and how we're going to look at it, You mentioned Chris O'Leary. I suppose he's just an interesting kind of a backstory in terms of he will be the same vintage. It's kind of Mark Coleman, Darragh Fitzgibbon and all them. Played minor in 21. I think he's a year older than them, but played minor 21 in that kind of age group. Played Fitzgibbon Cup for UCC, won one there. Involved kind of on and off in Cork senior squads. And I don't think he would have played championship, but definitely would have played league at different times, but didn't work out. But very kind of a versatile guy. I'll be interested to see where they put him. I mean, I think he played in nearly every line from half back up to the full forward line in his Cork career. Going on the report yesterday, seemed to start at midfield and gets 3 points. So it'll be kind of interested to see where they kind of utilise him. I think Lucan, it's who we joined last year.
Yeah.
So, if this will be kind of a long-term thing, we'll be interested to see how he does.
It was just funny. I was at the Walsh Cup game against Westmeath, and they were all meeting after him. There was a group of the Lucan lads, 3 or 4 of them that were playing, and a few supporters. And it's just funny to hear the Cork accent in the middle, like the Cork accent contrast with the Dublin accent.
Yeah.
There couldn't be any more contrasting. But he's definitely a very useful one to have in there. Fintan, I know you have to go, but just a quick one in Division 2A. There's a clear kind of break between the 6 teams. Kerry, Kildare and Offaly on 4 points, down Derry and Carlow on 0 points. So 3 teams going for promotion and 3 teams kind of teetering with relegation. From a Kildare point of view, another really good result at the weekend. I think it was 117 to 19 points against Down. Like, that's really promising for the McDonagh campaign ahead, isn't it?
It is. The thing that stood out for me in terms of these 3 teams, though, was looked far more comfortable for Offaly than it did for Derry, and obviously the kind of points they put up against Derry. I mean, was it the Christy Ring final a couple of years ago? Was it that Derry they hit 40 points or whatever? So 33 yesterday. They definitely facing them in terms of the scores they put on the board. And I think for Kerry and Kildare's point of view, they'll be really heartened with those wins, because if either of them had slipped up yesterday, I think you're immediately kind of on the back foot. Going into the next few games, considering neither of them have played Offaly yet. And from Kildare, it was a good statement last week, beating Carlow. I think it was by 10 points, but I think they were down for a bit of yesterday's game. No pun intended, down on the scoreboard. Needed to kind of dig in and come back, and in a way, I'd say Herity will be kind of almost more heartened by that. Kerry similar at home. Carlow kind of made the early run in, but they kind of timed their run well to the finish line, and Malone will be happy with that. And yeah, it looks like 2 into 3 now. In terms of that kind of gap there, there's just 3 of them kind of going for it at this stage. I'm not sure what the way the fixture list comes yet, but they all have to play each other, so we're definitely looking into a fairly pivotal kind of crunch games over the next while. And from the Kildare point of view, look, they are the one I think everyone's looking at in terms of what Naas have done and the minors and the under 20s, where they can sustain it. But I think the yo-yo impact between Christy Ring and Joe McDonagh has been the real problem, so they need to kind of stabilise that. But it's the kind of young talent going through. I mean, I think Herity is looking at a couple of the guys that actually would have won Leinster Schools final with Naas on Friday in football.
Right, Cian Bourne, I think.
Cian Bourne is a big one. Yeah, he was cornerback in that. So this is probably something you never have to worry about in Kilkenny. But basically balancing hurling league commitments with Hogan Cup All-Ireland football commitments over the next while. You know, this wasn't an issue before, but that's just the reality, and he's probably trying to hope to kind of keep these guys in the hurling fold, anyone who is kind of dual inclined.
Just the last question. It's a really difficult one for promotion, isn't it? Because there's no point in saying any different. Everyone wants to play Division 1, but it's what, and you earned the right to play Division 1, like Westmeath earned the right to play Division 1 this year. It's just, I don't know. It's like not an advantage nearly to get promoted if you're going up into that Westmeath position for next year. I don't know. Maybe we need to, and I was saying it to Shane, he wants less league games, and I understand that. But when it was 1A and 1B and it was based on rankings, at least, you know, Laois were going to be playing Antrim, and they're going to be playing Offaly, and they're going to be playing Westmeath, and they're going to have at least 3 competitive games that they feel like they can win. Whereas Westmeath are going into 1A, and just say if it's Kerry go up, or if it's Offaly go up, or if it's Kildare go up, you're kind of on a hiding to nothing. If you get, it's a really difficult one, and hurling fortunes of teams changes so quickly now that you almost need to be like changing the structure every year to try and help some teams to be competitive. It's just it's a bit of a messy kind of situation where it's nearly not a good thing to get promoted long term. Nearly.
Yeah, there's a few different points to that. I would say in terms of the structure, like I would get rid of the preseason competitions, get rid of the league semi-finals, and spread the hurling league out a bit more, so we don't have a situation where teams feel they can't go foot to the floor for the whole thing in terms of the championship. It's probably separate to what you're saying. For the Laois, Antrim, Westmeath, definitely the 1A, 1B setup would be far better. But then you're going to get a situation where the couple of higher counties in the top 8 or 9 that aren't in it, I mean, you know, I remember there was a time it felt like Liam Dunn of Wexford throughout his tenure was having to say, and Sparrow, Loughlin would kind of have been similar enough in his Clare around that time, you know, give us a chance to compete with the top counties, because they were always the kind of 2 or 3 in the 1B that weren't kind of managing to get out of it. Limerick actually, you know, like it feels like a long time ago now. We're in that kind of setup as well. Like, you know, the one county I think it could be great for, I think, a Kildare if they got to Division 1 for a year. Just what it would do for the county to have the novelty of, like, they're playing their game yesterday, for example, in Hawkfield against Down. I imagine all their games, if they're in Division 1 hurling league, would be in Newbridge. Like, just what would it do if they were welcoming Limerick or Kilkenny, or, you know, just the first year of that? I accept then if they go down and then they're back up following year. If they end up in a yo-yo existence, it isn't an easy one to kind of get out of. But just what it does for the season when you're there at the top flight, in terms of the kind of novelty and all that, you know. And I think you just have to expose the counties to it and kind of hope that they can come through. But I think the one thing Kildare could have in their favour as opposed to others is just the numbers game, just the simple population aspect, the fact that it's growing, the fact that a town like Naas is so big, and the fact that hurlers are coming through in kind of different places like that. Whereas, like, you know, Kerry are similar to Westmeath. If Kerry get 2 or 3 injuries, or you know, I know there's a couple of players Kerry we're looking at this year, gone with the Kerry under 20 footballers, you know, and one was involved in the McGrath Cup who'd been with the Kerry hurlers last year. Maybe they might get him back, Barry Manny. I don't know what the situation is there, but they can't absorb those losses anymore, you know. But I think if you're a Heritage, I think you'd really want to kind of get up there. I'd imagine Offaly will be the same at this stage, you know, like just kind of get back up to that scene. And I suppose rather than telling kind of 12-year-olds about the stories of the 90s kind of forever, like introduce them to a new generation, say, right, you know, Clare are coming, or Tipp are coming, or Wexford are coming to. I'll let you decide what venue these games are going to be on, or they've off your hosting.
There'd only be one venue if it was up to me anyway.
I don't want to open that kind of worm, so I'd say whatever Offaly's home stadium of choice will be for that match, you know. But I think for those 3 at this stage, if you're asking them for 2024, I'd say, look, they just want to get up there, you know.
Yeah. Fintan, thanks a million. I really appreciate that. Good man.
No problem, Bernie. Chat to you soon.
Cheers. Good man. I'll fly through a few comments here. We loads of comments in here. Richard Hogan was just saying, in fairness, Heritage has a football background. He surely does indeed. TV Street, there's nothing like hiding from a good team to learn over, and you can't. Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest with you, about a good hiding being a learning experience. It's okay having one, but if you have 5, and say as Offaly had last year, I don't know, does that actually help progress you? Hugh Paddy just says, you'll always have a few counties complain about the league not competing to a higher level, etc., etc. But this is the essence of a league. Bring back the old AM1B. Well, I'd have to say here, Hugh Paddy, on that. I do, like, Galway won the All-Ireland from 1B. I think we're Limerick in 1B when they won the All-Ireland, might have been promoted that year as well. I just think it offers the teams that are in that kind of limbo land almost that probably ranked 9 to 13 or 14, offers them, they're guaranteed they're going to have a couple of competitive games. And if they still get relegated to Division 2A after, then so be it. They weren't good enough to beat your Laois or your Antrim or your Offaly to stay up. So I'd be a big fan of that system, I have to say. And I know it's the old structure, but and I think, yeah, I think winning the league then would maybe have a bit more value then as well. And as Fintan says there, I'd be getting rid of the pre-season competition. I'd maybe try and play Fitzgibbon and Sigerson before Christmas, start the league a small bit earlier, but still have plenty of time, maybe a month before they play a championship. But just fly through a couple of results. We just touched on Division 2A there. So it was Kerry 18 points, Carlow 113. I think Marty Kavanagh was sent off actually early in the second half. That obviously had a big bearing on things. But Kerry win by 2 points on home soil. Offaly 33, Derry 115. The scoreline probably looks pretty deceiving here. This was really tight in the first half. My own club, my own Cattle came off the bench, I think just before half time. He ended up with 12 points, 7 from play actually, 5 from place balls. That was huge. David Nally finished with 6 as well, 2 from play. Charlie Mitchell also had 4 from play, but Offaly really put the afterburners on by all accounts in the second half after a pretty difficult first half. Mentioned the Kildare win there, finished Kildare 117, down 19 points. James Burke with 7 points, 5 frees. Colin McCabe with 1-2 as well. Big win there. So there's a clear, distinct line between the 3 teams at the top of 2A and the 3 teams down the bottom. Round our Division 2B, London 213, Donegal 118. So a 2-point win for Donegal. A late rolling Crowley goal threatened to give London a share of the spoils at Ruislip, but Donegal responded well to claim the last 2 scores of the game and the points on offer in a 118 to 213 triumph. I think Ronan used to actually play with Lancashire. He used to be the main man for Lancashire, but he's obviously living down in London now. I wasn't pretty by all accounts, but Wicklow had a good win against Tyrone, 15 points to 12. Dermot Masterson was the main man. He ended up with 6 points. Christy Morehouse and Luke Evans chipped in with 2 apiece from play as well. Meath had a good win against Sligo on away side. It finished Sligo 113, Meath 22 points. So Meath are top of the table with 4 points after their 2 games. Saoirse Bulfin side. A great win for Monaghan in Division 3A. Finished Monaghan 217, Armagh 22 points. That was on Saturday night up in the Athletic Grounds. Kieran Guinan's point in the 3rd and final minute of injury time helped Monaghan secure a 217 to 22 win. So that's a big win for them. Probably the result of the weekend. And it mightn't get too much traction, but it's a huge result for Fermanagh. Finished Fermanagh 218, Mayo 216. So Mayo were actually in the Christy Ring Cup final last year. But they were relegated from 2B, and this is a really disappointing result. It probably puts them on the back foot if they're trying to get promoted again. I know they were down a lot of the Turin players. Don't think Shane Boland was involved. Not sure if Fergal Boland is involved with them after their club campaign. He's obviously not involved with the footballers anymore. And I didn't see Keith Higgins lined up the other day either. And as Joe Butler says, Joe is well on the scene in Mayo. He just says that Mayo are still without the Turin players, and listen, very, very difficult for any team to be without a big cohort of players. You see with Ballyhale in Kilkenny, and it's the same with Turin in Mayo. To fly down through a couple of the other results there. Louth had a good win over Roscommon, 216 to 15 points, and Division 3B, Cavan finished 220, Warwickshire 2-9. And Antrim had a 5-point win over Lancashire, 321 to 316. Just a couple of fixtures coming up. The Sigerson Cup final on Wednesday. That's UCC against UL. Fintan was mentioning earlier about colleges changing their names. The two of the oldest traditional colleges still have their names, original names. Thank God there's no big letters or acronyms or anything in front of them. And UL are obviously looking to bounce back from last year's final. And just a couple of bits of news from the weekend. There's a bit of grief in Donegal, it seems, at the moment. So the Donegal GA Academy faces an uncertain future after its coaches walked out. It's understood that the mass exodus is a show of solidarity in line of Carol Lacey's recent decision to step away from his role as academy head. There was also plenty of controversy involved in the Ashbourne Cup. So This is not it seems like a lot of time camogie and ladies football, the times we're talking about are when there's mad things going on. So this was a really, really strange one. So UL have been eliminated from this year's Ashburn Cup, the Blue Ribbon third level camogie championship in extraordinary circumstances. The Limerick Colleges played Maynooth in the final game of the group stages, requiring a win to draw a level on points with DCU and TUD. According to competition rules, score difference would determine which two of the three would qualify for the semi-finals. A table published on the official third level camogie social media channels showed DCU with a scoring difference after the 3 games of plus 31, with UL's shown as -2. In a statement released over the weekend, the UL panel said they claimed they received confirmation from the CCAO executive of the standings prior to the game at Maynooth, which remarkably they won by 34 points. So they obviously thought that they were getting through, and it just seems to have changed a couple of days beforehand. So it's a bit of a mess. Like the marquee third level camogie competitions, and they were in disarray. And I saw that the UL squad travelled to the game and were actually sitting watching the game almost in protest. So really, really messy situation for the Camogie Association to deal with there. Richard Hogan just says Kildare also have a big blow in population from the likes of Cork, Tipp, Limerick, etc., which has helped grow the sport. And while Deise is well known as a hurling hotbed, by all accounts, Maynooth is going to be a bit of a hurling hotbed as well. TV Street said, GA said, he said rugby is better to watch than hurling. He sounds like rugby is definitely not better to watch than hurling. There's no game better to watch than hurling. That's it, folks. Thanks a million for joining myself and Fintan today. Shane will be back once again for Thursday's show, where you're all going to have to listen to him waxing lyrical about Tipperary. But thanks a million for joining us again, folks, and we will see you all next week.